What's going on, football freaks and football geeks? I'm Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and welcome to week 3 of my weekly NFL pick show for the 2013-2014 NFL season. Now, as you're going to remember from last week's show, no headlines from week 2. Going to go right into my results from week 2 before we get to the predictions for week 3. We're going to start with the week 2 results of my top 2, looking at the against the spread as well as the over-under plays. Had a much better week in week 2 than I did in week 1. Against the spread, I told you to take Dallas +3. They did end up losing the game, but they only lost by a single point, so that worked out there. I also told you to take Atlanta -6.5. Now, the line for the majority of the week in this game was Atlanta -7. If I would have taken the line at Atlanta -7, this would have been a push. I snagged that line early when it was 6.5, just very briefly, and so that worked out for me. Really should have been a push because they won the game by exactly 7 points, but the hell with it. I got 6.5. I'm taking it as a win. We go to the over-under. I told you to take a couple of overs last week. Chicago, Minnesota to go over 42 points, as well as Philly, San Diego to go over 53. Both of those worked out, so I was 2-0 over-under, 2-0 against the spread. On the season, I am 3-1 picking against the spread and 2-2 picking over-under, 5-3 on the season for the top 2. Now let's take a look at the platinum, gold, silver, and bronze picks for week 2, see how I did on them. For the bronze pick, we'll start at the bottom. I told you to take Cincinnati. Cincinnati went in, beat Pittsburgh 20-10. Right now, Pittsburgh can't run the ball. They can't throw the ball. They're too injured. They're leaning completely on their defense. I don't see how Pittsburgh is going to pull themselves out of this. They got to get healthy, and that's a problem for them. However, they were able to keep Andy Dalton to A.J. Green, which I told you was going to be one of the elite tandems in football this year. They were able to hold Dalton to Green to just 6 receptions for 41 yards. That being said, Cincinnati beats Pittsburgh 20-10. Give me my bronze pick. For my silver pick, I told you to take the reigning Super Bowl champions, the Baltimore Ravens, making their home field debut against the Cleveland Browns. This was really a bit of a stinker of a game, but Baltimore ends up getting the win here 14-6. Very rare score and very low scoring. Like, do we call this a defensive struggle or do we just call this a bad game? It's hard to tell the difference really between the two. For the gold pick, I told you to take Atlanta to beat St. Louis. That worked out. Atlanta beat them, as we mentioned before, by exactly 7 points. 31-24. Both quarterbacks in this game go for 30-plus receptions, 350-plus yards, and multiple touchdowns. This was a quarterback battle from the get-go. The Falcons led this game 21-0 in the early second quarter. St. Louis was, of course, able to rally back. These two teams combined for just 3.1 yards per carry on the ground. It's a big concern for Atlanta now that their starting running back, Steven Jackson, is, I believe, injured. He's not on the injured reserve, but I believe he's going to miss a couple of weeks with an injury, so could be problems on the ground there for the Falcons. And for the platinum pick, I told you to take Green Bay over Washington. I told you to do yourself a favor, take the over in this game if you're betting it. If you would have bet the over, it would have worked out. 58 points scored between these two. Green Bay rolls to an easy 38-20 victory. I've said this multiple times of Aaron Rodgers. He's basically the fantasy cheat code. If you have Aaron Rodgers in fantasy, you're a happy camper. 34-8 for 480 yards and 4 touchdowns in this game. What a performance. The Packers led this game 24-0 at the half. Of course, the Redskins have a way of getting behind in these games. They rallied back a little bit, but it was still a very comfortable win. You had 5 players in this game, wide receivers and running backs, putting up at least 100 yards of offense, and those are real big numbers. 2 defenses that are probably not the greatest, especially on Washington's side. They're having real trouble this year. Great offensive performance from both of these teams. Platinum, gold, silver, and bronze picks all work out in my favor. 4-0 in week 2, 8-0 on my lock picks so far this season. Overall, in week 2, it was another very, very successful week for yours truly. Straight up, I went 11-5 in week 2 for a 24-8 mark on the season so far, sitting in the 91st percentile on Yahoo. 2 very, very good weeks here to start off the season. In the private pick'em, we picked up a couple more players. I believe last week we had either 15 or 16. We're now up to 18. And from those 18, I currently sit in second place, just 1 point behind our overall leader. So I'm second place out of 18, 230 of a possible 272 confidence points, a clip of about 85% on the season. Real great numbers there. In week 2, I was able to rake in 117 of 136 possible confidence points, a clip of 86%, and that was good enough to give yours truly the win in week 2. Shout out to our overall leader. He remains our overall leader from week 1, Cutler For MVP. Has an equal record to me of 24-8, has one single more confidence point on the season than I do, 231 out of 272 for an equal clip of 85%. So again, a shout out to Jay Cutler. You are still our overall leader. Now we got the week 2 results out of the way. Let's get you into the predictions for week 3. We're going to start, of course, with the top 2 against the spread and over-under plays this week. If we're looking at against the spread, my top ATS play this week is going to be Chicago -1. Now, of course, Chicago goes into their game this week. They are on the road going into Pittsburgh, going into Heinz Field. Now, this is my thing here, and I hate to feel like I'm picking on Pittsburgh, but I may be talking about them maybe even twice in this top 2. It's not that I don't like Pittsburgh, it's just that right now there's so many injuries. Their offense is so scatterbrained right now. They're not really doing much of anything right. And I take a look at Chicago, and Chicago, I feel, has played very, very well the first 2 weeks of the season. Not perfect, but played very, very well. There's just a lot of trust on the Chicago side of the field, and aside from the defense, not a whole heck of a lot of trust here from Pittsburgh. So my top ATS play this week, I think Chicago -1 is a gift, so I suggest you take it. Chicago -1 for my top ATS play this week. My number 2 ATS play this week comes in the Philadelphia KC game. Now, Philadelphia is, of course, playing host to this game. The line right now currently sits at Philadelphia -3. KC did a great thing last week by beating Dallas. I didn't say they were going to beat Dallas. I was skeptical. I sort of fell for that Tony Romo early season magic looking stuff. A stiffer test here because you're going to be going into Philadelphia. And Philadelphia running that Chip Kelly offense, they've looked phenomenal. They've put up 30 points in both of their first 2 games. I need to see Kansas City's defense stop something like this. Now, if they can do this on, I believe they're on the Thursday night game, or now somebody can correct me if I'm wrong in saying that, but I believe they're on the Thursday night game. If they can go out there in prime time, stop this Chip Kelly offense for less than, I would say, 30 points, or even less than, let's go less than 28. If they can keep them to less than 28 points and somehow win this game, then I'll be impressed, and then I'll start believing in the Chiefs. As of right now, I got to think that Philly -3 is another little bit of a gift, so I'm going to have to take Philly -3 as my number 2 ATS pick of this week. Let's go to the over-under plays, the best ones, in my opinion, for week 3. We're going to start with my favorite over-under play this week, and that comes in the Houston at Baltimore game. The number here is 44.5. Now, this game is in Baltimore where the scores tend to stay a little bit lower because Baltimore's defense tends to take it up to the next level when they're playing at home. And their offense, those being the offense of the Ravens, really didn't impress me last week, only being able to put up 14 points on Cleveland. In comes Houston. Houston's got a very, very good defense. They haven't played the greatest this season, comparable to what I know they're capable of playing, we'll put it that way. The number here being 44.5, I think 44.5 is too many. I think this is 2 good defenses. It's going to be a grinding kind of game. I still don't know 100% what the availability of Ray Rice is going to be, if anything. And you're also looking on the other side of things. I believe Andre Johnson has a concussion from last week. Again, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong in saying that. I see 2 kind of banged up offenses, 2 defenses who are capable of playing very, very well. I see the score staying way, way down in this game. So in Houston at Baltimore, I'm going to tell you to take under 44.5 points. My second favorite over-under play this week, I contemplated picking on Pittsburgh again, but I'm not going to. My number 2 favorite over-under play this week is actually going to come in the KC at Philadelphia game. Now this number is 50.5. When I look at this game, I see two defenses who are capable. Kansas City has had some great numbers. I believe they've only given up 18 points this season. Now you have to remember that one of those games was to Jacksonville, where they won that game 28-2. So their offensive numbers a little blown up, their defensive numbers a little blown up based on that game. The Dallas game was a much bigger measure, and it was 17-16. So still was kept low scoring, so still an indication of a pretty decent defense, but we all know that Dallas is more than capable of beating themselves. With Philadelphia's offense playing the way it is, and with Kansas City's offense playing the way it's capable of playing, Alex Smith has looked good this year. 50.5, while it seems like a big number, sort of the same thing I said from Philly-San Diego last week, it's a big number, but it's a manageable number because Philly, as they've shown in their first 2 games, are capable of putting up 30 points on their own. Kansas City's capable of putting up somewhere in the 20 range. That gets us to 50 points already. So I'm actually going to tell you to take the over in this game. Yeah, they're going to have to hit at least 51 in order to make that work out, but I think they're capable of doing it. Philadelphia, Kansas City, 2 good offenses who are playing rather well right now. I'm going to tell you to take over 50.5 points. Now let's take a look at the platinum, gold, silver, and bronze picks for week 3. And if there was a theme to this week's games, it's playing it safe. If you remember my week 3 from last season, it was disastrous. The bronze pick, we're going to start with the New Orleans Saints playing at home to the Arizona Cardinals. This is not a product of disliking anything that Arizona has done this year. I actually think they've played relatively well. It is simply a product of New Orleans being New Orleans and playing in New Orleans. Drew Brees' numbers have not quite been where I hoped they would be at, especially considering I have him on one of my fantasy teams, but his numbers have still been good enough. And the rest of the team around him just playing very, very good football. I just think New Orleans is playing well. So I trust them to go in here at home and probably pick Arizona apart. So I'm going to take New Orleans to beat Arizona for the bronze pick. My silver pick sees the San Francisco 49ers coming back home to the West Coast to take on the Indianapolis Colts. Let's take out for a second that Indianapolis has to travel quite a ways for this game. Colin Kaepernick is a much better quarterback than he showed last week in the game against Seattle. I think you kind of have to take that game, put it into its own context. We all know how good Colin Kaepernick is, especially when he plays Green Bay, but we all know how good he is, and I don't think Indianapolis has anything on the defensive side of the ball to really keep up with him. Now, Indianapolis, of course, has lost their backup running back, Vic Ballard, to injury, I believe, for the rest of the season, so that leaves Ahmad Bradshaw, who's kind of wonky in his own right injury-wise, to carry the load here. Too much versus not enough. San Francisco is going to roll in this game, so I'm telling you that San Francisco will beat Indianapolis, and that is my silver pick. The gold pick this week, and this is the one that everybody's going to laugh at, the Seattle Seahawks playing host to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Nothing else needs to be said. Seattle's at home. Seattle's going to roll. They might put up 50 points. Seahawks over the Jags. And the platinum pick this week has the Denver Broncos playing at home against the Oakland Raiders. Now, this is actually a very interesting game to me because I'm very interested in Terrell Pryor. I've actually never seen him play a game live, so it'll be really, really fun, actually. I believe this game is on Monday Night Football. It's going to be really, really fun to get my first taste of Terrell Pryor because I've heard some very critical things about him, but I've also heard really, really good things about him. So it's going to be very interesting for me to see him play live. It's just unfortunate that it's going to have to be against Denver. Peyton Manning has about 300 touchdown passes already, and I believe he's thrown -6 interceptions. So the dude is just perfect, and that whole team is humming. That team could quite possibly be the best team in football. Take the Broncos, bet your life on it. The Denver Broncos beat the Oakland Raiders at home for my gold pick. And now it's time to take a look at the rest of my picks for week 3 of the 2013-2014 NFL season. 24-8 so far. We're going to keep it going. That's the Week 3 show for you, folks. Comments, hate, and love in the comments section below. Thought I would just take a minute, let you know how my fantasy football teams are doing so far in this year. Also let you know I'm still alive through 2 weeks in my Survivor pool. Yes, first time ever doing a Survivor pool. Now, I'm in 3 fantasy football leagues on Yahoo. The first one belongs to my friend Tommy George. In that league, I'm 1-1, currently sitting in 4th place out of 10. I'm in another league with a friend of mine that I met through a group on Facebook. In that group, I currently sit in 3rd place out of 14 with a perfect 2-0 record. And in my group, I currently sit in 1st place with a record of 2-0. Also, in the YouTube Prognosticators League on ESPN, I have a 1-1 record, just coming off of a absolute destruction of Team Take'em's Billy Biles. Oh man, did I ever kill him this week. Last week, of course, the last week, week one, sorry. Of course, I was avenging my loss to the other member of Team Take'em, Sean Ryan. This week, I am taking on none other than Christina from Yes What I Say Goes, and it is going to be a absolute bloodbath. Christina, bring it on this week, honey. That is it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. Enjoy the slate of games on Week 3. We'll see you again for Week 4.